Hey everyone, welcome to another episode from Pro Engineering. In this episode, we're going to take this perfectly good Tamiya Lunchbox Dodge van body and put a whole bunch of holes in it. We're going to do that by using these Pro window frames. This is how this works. We take the frame and we line it up on the outside. Now it's actually installed from the inside, but we have to line it up on the outside in order to figure out where to cut the body. You take the frame and this top edge of the frame, and yours will be made out of a clear polyjet material. This is just a black polyjet, but it's more of a clear translucent that you'll be getting, which will be available on Shapeways. You take this and you line it up directly under the rain gutter like that. So once you've done that, you have the vertical alignment taken care of. However, now you've got this horizontal alignment. And for this next bit is going to be a little bit less accurate. What you want to do, I'm going to try and do it the best I can, is line up this door window and this door window as centered as possible. Do not look at this front window nor this back window. The back window, as you can see, is actually biased toward the front, and the front window has this outer rib, so it'll give you the illusion that it's off center. So just ignore that and focus on the two door windows. Basically, you're going to want to ensure that this gap inside of here, not the overall gap, but the gap from the door gap to this window frame and this window frame to that door gap is equal. Once you do that, which I'm gonna do right now, we're gonna take our Sharpie and just kind of mark it out as best we can. I'm not being too accurate because you'll notice that I'm actually marking the wrong side of this. I should be marking the outside. Unfortunately, that's just a lot harder to do. So we're just gonna do this like that, and I'll move my thumb now. Okay. And now we have an idea of where we have to cut outside of. Obviously, this will have to be a little bit larger, so something around here has to be done. Now, the key with this, oh, look how accurate I am. The key with this is to make the cuts as small as possible initially. Don't overdo it because then you have a big hole to fill at later on, so you don't want to do that. Okay, and okay, it's roughly. I think I made a little bit too much on that back window, but it should be. No, that's actually pretty good. So I do want to talk about this front window for a moment. The keen-eyed Dodge van aficionados will know that what I've designed here is wrong. Here's the deal. The Tamiya Lunchbox Dodge van body was kind of a compromise. Usually, you either have this panel with no window, which we have here, or we have a window, or we have this panel completely deleted on shorter vans. The thing is, the variation with the window, as well as the variation like this with the delete, this panel is much, much larger. So technically, at least with my extensive research, maybe I've missed something completely obscure or somehow glossed over it, but I have not seen a Dodge van with this size of a panel. And on top of that, and all the variations with the windows, either have all the windows like you see here, and this panel just not in existence, or these three windows as well as this window. So I went ahead and just made a smaller version of that window. The other side will be a little bit easier, and I suppose I should have mentioned that you can also line up this edge right here with this door gap. But I don't know. I mean, I try to get it as accurate as possible. It's just pretty difficult to take some of these measurements given the fact that the door gap is there. Do you measure to the center of the door gap, the outer edge, the inner edge? So to me, I think it's more important to make sure that these windows are centered. Therefore, I would center the windows. On the other side, since there's nothing here, it's a little bit easier. In this case here, we'll just line it up exactly as we did before with the rain gutter. And then here by the front window, just place it right before the door gap right there, and then go ahead and mark these windows as well. Last but fortunately least is the rear. So same as before, line up the top to the rain gutter and just make sure that the gap in the center right here is as even as possible, and then just go ahead and mark it away. At this point here, we'll put on our safety goggles, put on some ear protection, and get the Dremel tool out with the cutting bit. Those of you with a weak stomach probably want to look away right now. right. Let me just dust that off a little bit there. Here is where we are at. Definitely looks a little bit, I'm going to let in a little bit more light now. Obviously a long way to go still, but at this point I did want to test fit everything, just see where the heck it's at. All right. The goal now is to have this inner edge right here, right there, all this inner edge at about the same height as this inner edge here. I think we still have some trimming to do. We're actually not that far off. Now this detailed trimming I want to do with an X-Acto knife because I feel like I have more control that way. If you are interested in doing this as well and you're going to trim with the X-Acto knife as well, please, 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 please be careful. The X-Acto knives are very, very sharp and you can really hurt yourself bad with them. Okay, the rear, how's the back looking? Yeah, same, all right, not too bad, yeah. Everything's gotta be opened up a little bit, but we're not that far off. These two tabs at the bottom, I just go ahead and ignore those for now. We're not gonna focus on that in this episode, but they do have a use, I promise you. Okay, I think at this point here, we need to clean off the workspace and then we can start shaving this very, very carefully with the X-Acto knife. Very carefully using the X-Acto knife, I enlarged all of the holes. And this is critical because the X-Acto knife will do the enlargement very, very slowly, whereas the Dremel tool is going to kind of arbitrarily make the hole. So perhaps you're better at the Dremel than I am, but I think it's better to undersize the hole than to kind of screw it up and go too big. So as you can see here, they look gigantic. I kind of very carefully cut them out slowly but surely, just using this window frame here as a reference. So remember, this inner surface is the same as this inner surface here, and the bottom is the same as this bottom. So once I did that, oh, and make sure that you get off all of these burrs here, because that's going to prevent them from sitting nicely like on this side. You can go ahead and take your window panel. Remember to treat this very, very, very carefully because this is the ultra detail plastic on Shapeways, which has a lot of detail as the name implies, but it is also very, very weak. So here's the thing. I'll try and make this noticeable. This face here, if you can see the shiny face right there, the face that I'm poking with the X-Acto knife, this face and the white on the plastic are the same face. This means that this surface here has to be coplanar around the entire perimeter for all the windows. This is what is going to give us that seamless effect. The inner wall, which is also kind of hard to see, this inner wall right here is the window frame. I have to do the other side here and the rear, but the procedure is identical. Once all three sides are complete, we can then glue this into place, at which point we can begin to fill all of the gaps. I'm ready now to install the window frames. What you are going to want to do in preparation for this, of course, is simply make sure that the gap between this inside face here, I mean, you could also use this inner face as well, but the inside of the outer trim is what will eventually be blended into the van body. So you are going to want to make sure that the gap between this here and perhaps the inside or the outside of the rain gutter, doesn't really matter as long as you're measuring consistently, is the same back here as it is in the front. I've got my digital caliper to do that, and I'm going to go from the outside, the top of the rain gutter to the inside. It's about 4.8, and over here we're at about 4.0. That was about the same, wasn't it? Wow, that's lucky. Okay, so those are in there, and they happen to stay. You can see that simply because of the friction. The only material that this is available in from Shapeways is the ultra detail plastic, and I have to remind you that that's very, very brittle. Don't think it's like glass. There is some flexibility to it, but it is not like nylon or any kind of resin. You'll also notice that the ones I'm working with now are these. Yours will be clear if you are in fact interested in this disaster. The earlier version you saw was this here, and that's kind of the beauty of the way I work, is I have to develop this as I move forward. This version here I thought would have worked fine, but it turns out that I have to clamp these in place somehow, and you can't clamp it in place if the gap behind it is hollow. So that's what's happened here. That is installed. So now what we're going to do is clamp it down like I just showed, and I don't know how easy this is going to be. And ultimately I want to simply grab it in the center because I want to force this center section into place. The outer section, don't worry, it'll seat itself nicely, but the center section is where you have to make sure that it's actually clamped in place. So we'll just drop that in like that as well. I might even have room for a couple of these. No, I won't. I lied. And this one here, I'm not entirely certain what can be done. Perhaps just right here. Unfortunately, I can't put any kind of clamp on this pillar, so what I'm going to do is just glue the rest in, and then I'll bond that afterwards. For this next step, we want to run super glue into this channel. Now there's a couple of options. You can use a gel-like super glue, or you can use something that's very runny. You want to use something runny because you want to make sure that the super glue penetrates basically all this area inside here. All this area right there. So by using capillary action, it will in fact do that. So we'll just put a droplet here. Don't go too insane, because the more glue you get on the outside, and as I say that, of course, I get it all over the outside. Focus on the inner side. Just like that. Okay. Okay, that's pretty good. You don't have to go too crazy on this because once this sets up, you can probably glue it in from the back side as well. But that's pretty good. Now we'll let that cure, and you'll want to do the same to the rear as well as the other side. I'm not going to bother showing that on film as it's going to be identical to this side. We'll then do the C-pillar with the same clamps and use the clamps for the bottom as well as the top. So it'll be a multiple part operation. As this side is drying, I did go ahead and put the rear in. I had the same problem with the centers, that I simply didn't have the space for a clamp, so I started with the outsides, again measuring that both of these areas here are in fact parallel to the rain gutter, and glued them in place. We'll do the center after those have dried. The window inserts are all fully installed. I've gone ahead and slowly filled the gaps, at least as much as I possibly can, with some super glue. And they're not completely filled, but in fact I may put some more on that one. Basically, the plan is to get as much super glue in here as possible because that is a much more rigid filler than, let's say, putty or Bondo. The first thing I want to do is sand down the high spots of the super glue. And I'm going to do that in some small areas using some kind of flat object. And I don't know why I seem to be drawn to this particular ink cartridge, but I use it for everything. I think it's weird. I don't know why, but nevertheless, that's what we're going to use. And we're going to take this, and unfortunately I really can't do this on camera because it's one of those things where I have to have this in front of my face and just kind of focus on areas that are a little bit too high. And you want to be careful because, as you can see, we're sanding down the perimeter of the window frame. That's what you want to do, because this window frame perimeter is going to be the same height as the body. The issue, of course, is over sanding it down by not using a flat sanding tool. So we'll do this to knock down all the high spots on the super glue, and then we'll fill in all the gaps with some high quality body putty. I hope this is noticeable, but I've sanded down all of the outer frames of each one of the windows to the point where the sanding of the frames finally came into contact with the ABS body. That will ensure that all of these perimeters are on the same plane or on the same surface as the plastic. Once that has been accomplished, I hope you can see it maybe from the side. It might be a little bit difficult, but basically you can see how flat, or how flush I should say, everything is. And the same is true of the rear. All right, so on this side you can see that I have puttied it, and I'm using the Tamiya putty. I don't usually like doing this because putty always cracks, but what you're seeing here is kind of an optical illusion. The super glue beneath it, in fact, I'll turn it around. The super glue is filling up almost the entire cavity. So even though this looks really, really messy, the putty is only going to fill in a hairline crack around the perimeter. And the reason why I've chosen to use the putty instead of the super glue is the super glue is very, very hard to sand. And that could cause other issues where the super glue would sand at a slower rate than the plastic would. So that could be another problem. To do this, what I've been doing is just taking a little bit of putty and putting it on a flat surface like that. And then I'm going to get the X-Acto knife, and I've got a couple of different styles. I'm going to use this scalpel one here. Kind of cut a little chunk of it off. And then just get I'm doing this through the viewfinder, of course. So we'll just take the putty and just kind of, you want to squish it into the area where it has to go. This is really messy, I'm sorry. There it goes, you can see it there now. Really, you want to make sure it gets in the gap and doesn't leave a void. And then by all means, get rid of the putty wherever you don't want it. So I'm going to spend a little while now just continuing this around the perimeter of every single one of these windows. You can see that the window has had all of the body filler applied and is now, it's basically all dry at this point here. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and simply sand it down with some sandpaper. Again, you're going to want to use a sanding block to do this properly. So I'll go ahead and get that going and we'll come back and see if we need a second coat. I think I've gotten to a point now where we are ready to shoot it with a coat of primer. I don't think it's perfect. In fact, you can see little imperfections right there. There's one there, a little tiny one there, but for the most part, I mean, running your finger over everything, it feels completely smooth and uniform. The reason why I want to primer this is because I'm not going to be able to see a lot of these imperfections until the vehicle is all one color, but you can see we are really on our way there. You're looking at this after about 3 different attempts of patching imperfections and sanding, so it's definitely time consuming, but hopefully the results are going to be worth it. So let me go ahead and shoot this with a coat of primer and we'll be right back. Well, I believe the last wet sanding has been completed and the van is ready to paint. The hole's all missing now. Let's do it. As you can see, the van has been painted. I went with the two-tone, but that's not going to affect any of the window stuff. So the thing is, this little channel around the window frame is, on the real car, a gasket. So to simulate that, it's going to be pretty hard to paint that. I mean, you can definitely do it. I'm sure a lot of people out there are better than me. But I'm going to take this here. I wish I knew what it was called because it's, yeah, got a thing in the front of it. Anyway, I'll have the part number, that. And what we're going to do, which should be incredibly easy, I say that now, and we're going to take the tip of this and just dip it right in there. Look at that. It's like magic. And we'll do that about 300 more times on the rest of the car. Once all the panel line accenting is done, you can take your silver paint pen. Here, this is just a silver Sharpie. Unfortunately, I seem to have either lost the footage or not actually recorded it. But basically, you just take the tip of the paint pen and just run it along that inner embossed edge, and you'll get that really nice silver surface. The inside of it, you can see that there, that's all painted a flat black. So I painted that flat black first and then painted the silver. And the little window pop rivets over here, you'll paint the entire thing black and then just do a little silver dot right on it like that. Just notice I missed a spot right there. Now for the big bit, to install the windows. I went ahead and printed out and cut out some templates of the windows. Here's the deal. Even though I asked the printer to print these at 1:1, it didn't. But at least it got me really close. I had to make it like 3 or 4 millimeters longer, and the height was just a fraction of a millimeter, but it was really close. With that, I made the side windows, the back window, and then I'm also going to do door windows using this piece, and the windshield right there. These should be pretty straightforward. Well, at least these 3 will. These will not, since you got to put them on a flat body. But these are just going to drop into their location and glue straight in. Here's my plan. I'm going to put some hot glue in this area, and this area, being careful not to put too much. What you don't want is to have it squish out and be visible on the outside. That would be a disaster. Once that's in, I can then use some model glue and kind of just push it down in these corners and give it some time to cure. But if these are in, it'll do a couple of things. Number one, it'll hold the majority of the window in. But number two, it will also help the window to curl a little bit and conform to the curvature of the body. You want to use very little hot glue. This is printed on a PolyJet printer, and they are susceptible to high temperatures. And on top of that, you don't want the paint on the other side getting damaged from the excessive heat. There it goes, a little droplet like this, like that. That may be too much. That's actually better. I'm going to try and take some of that off, only slightly scalding my finger and putting this down in the correct orientation with the shiny side down. And that should just plop. And this, it's already dry. It's bloody already hard. Just going to edit that out and pretend it never happened. All right, so what we're going to do here is wait until our hot glue has actually gotten hot. Yes. And then we can come in here and do a little droplet there, a wee droplet there, and a wee droplet there. And very quickly come in and drop in the window like kind of nearly like that. Give it a push into place. And once again, that has not cured. I don't think that's actually seated. Has it? No, it has. It has seated. It looks like it hasn't. I think it's because I just put very little there. Let's see if side 2 can be a little bit nicer, because it's usually what happens. There we go, a little dab there. Same thing here. I hate how it makes it a little strange. I'm gonna have to clean off of the window later on, but I think we're kind of stuck with that for this application here. Get that in there. You don't want to press that hard, because the last thing you want to do is crack the body on the outside. And that looks like it's all in there. It really cures a lot quicker than I would have thought. It's not particularly cold here. And last, the rear window should theoretically be the easiest one, but I've been wrong before, like during this video. Okay, just like that. Come over here, hit the camera, and that should just drop in just like that. So these are in. These are in. Well, again, you don't really need these, but I suppose if you're going to put these in, you probably want these. And there you go. These look hideous, so I'll just give a little coat of matte black paint in those areas and you won't see them anymore. But otherwise, there we go. We now have a fully window-equipped Tamiya Lunchbox body. This build was, I don't want to say it was difficult, but it certainly was not easy. It's definitely not for the beginner, but I guarantee you 90% of the people watching this are way more experienced than I am. So if I can do it, I suspect most of you out there can do it even better. Links, of course, are in the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.